Today I present the key findings of my PhD research on women's bargaining power and intra-household resource allocation in rural Ethiopia. My interest in this topic started while I was working on my master's thesis on determinants of child stunting in urban Ethiopia. That research introduced me to the wide literature on intra-household issues that focuses on the welfare of individuals as a unit of analysis. From this literature, substantial evidence suggests that there is a presence of unequal access and control of resources within a household, and this is particularly true, especially among men and women. And this is because of the unequal balance of power within a household, and because this aspect is particularly very important, studies have resorted to various measures of power that capture particularly women's bargaining power related to men. Although this literature has made substantial contributions in understanding resource allocation behavior within a household, it still shows some gaps. For instance, factors that affect women's bargaining power in one context are considered to be relevant in another context. Then there is more emphasis given to indicators that capture women's economic empowerment, and only little is known about which factors of which indicators of bargaining power are relevant for which welfare outcomes. Given these gaps, the objective of this thesis is to understand the factors that affect women's bargaining power in the context of rural Ethiopia. Based on this information, my research examines how these factors affect women's participation in on-farm work and their health status. It also investigates the effect of the balance of power within the household on children's labor and schooling outcomes. The methodological approach used is predominantly a quantitative analysis based on unique panel data from the Ethiopian Rural Household Survey. This data comes in 7 rounds, constitutes about 1,500 households per survey year, and it constitutes more than 8,000 individuals again per survey year. The data consists of 15 villages in 4 major regions in the country, and is representative of sedentary agriculture, and it excludes pastoralist area and urban areas. This data is particularly suitable for answering my research questions because it provides extensive individual level information on various welfare outcomes like participation in labor market, children's labor and schooling, women's health status, etc. This study also uses information from focus group discussions that I conducted in 4 sites, in 4 major regions in Ethiopia. These sites are covered by the Ethiopian Rural Household Survey. The purpose of the focus group discussion was to get a sense of what villagers perceive to be as important factors behind women's bargaining power. This information was then used to come up with potential indicators of proxies from the quantitative data. Having presented the objectives, the data and methodology used, I now present the key findings of my research. The first finding of the study shows that the factors that affect women's bargaining power should be viewed within a given context, using rural Ethiopia as an important case study. It suggests that a woman's bargaining power not only originates from the material or asset dimensions, but also from the social, the marital institutions, and the agency dimensions. The findings show the correlation between women's bargaining power and the type of marital arrangement at the beginning of the marriage. However, few existing studies show this. Marriages in this context are arranged by couple's parents in most cases, and it can also be arranged by abduction or bridal kidnapping, or in few of the cases by mutual consent, and could involve written marital contracts or verbal contracts. Marriage by kidnapping puts a woman in a relatively lower bargaining position because it gives her lower fallback options, while a marriage arranged by parents ensures better fallback option because a woman has the backing of her parents since the marriage is arranged by them. Marriages based on mutual consent are considered to be a deviation from the widely accepted tradition. The findings suggest that a woman in such marriage exercises more agency than a woman in a marriage arranged by her parents or by kidnapping. The findings also suggest that a woman in marriage that involve a written marital contract has better fallback options related to marriage that do not involve such contracts, because in case divorce happens, this kind of arrangement ensures that a woman gets half of household assets. The second findings of the study shows that a woman with a better bargaining power that particularly originates from being in a self-arranged marriage and who has a written marital contract has a lower probability of participating in self-employed work. It's also found that women's participation in this type of work increases when agricultural shocks occur. However, not all women respond to these shocks in the same manner, since women with better bargaining power have a lower probability of participating in this type of work, even in times of shocks. Besides the usual income effect argument in economics, the sociological literature shows the importance of understanding the perceptions of various types of work in a given context. For example, in this context, work associated with traditional hairdressing, for instance, and selling local drinks, which are included in off-farm work in this data set, are considered to be indecent and usually are done by poor women or when women are under distressful situations. Work associated with selling firewood, for instance, requires that women travel long distances carrying heavy loads on their backs. Therefore, those women with higher bargaining power tend to avoid participating in such types of work, even at times of shocks. The third key findings of the study is that few common measures of power affect various dimensions of health. These dimensions of health are captured by self-reported illness, functional ability, body mass index, chronic energy deficiency. While the economic dimension is associated with more self-reported illness, which captures the wealth effect, it's found to be important for the more objective measures of health like body mass index. The agency dimension captured by, for instance, an interethnic marriage negatively affects functional ability, whereas the same dimension captured by an interreligious marriage is associated with better functional ability and lesser chronic energy deficiency. Marital arrangements such as kidnapping are found to have a negative effect on a woman's body mass index compared to marriages arranged by mutual consent. This seems to be associated with better body mass index and a lower incidence of chronic energy deficiency. The study also highlights the positive implication of women's power in the material dimension only if women have better bargaining power in other dimensions. The fourth key finding of the study shows that an increase in a woman's power relative to her husband, and the comparison is with households with balanced power between husband and wife, increases the number of hours children spend on domestic work. This is true for both boys and girls, although the magnitude is much larger for girls. It also shows that an increase in women's power positively affects the probability that boys attend school, while no effect was found for girls. More specifically, a powerful woman in deciding over human capital investment reduces the chance of a girl going to school. The findings also suggest that when a man is more powerful than his wife in this domain, the probability that both boys and girls going to school declines. And I didn't find any evidence that the power relationship within a household affects children's educational attainment. The results show that the relationship between a woman's power and child welfare is not always a positive one. presented the key findings of the study. I would like to conclude by highlighting some of the most important implications of this study. First, more improvements to women's position within the household in this context come from marital institutions and women's agency, particularly when this relates to women's participation in self-employed work and their health status. Second, the study highlights the importance of understanding why women participate in the labor market instead of assuming that this participation automatically leads to women's empowerment. This is because, given a specific context, particularly in the context of rural Ethiopia, not all work is desirable, and women who do undesirable work are already in a lower bargaining position. Third, the study highlights that improving women's health by empowering them should take into account the effect of distinct dimensions of power on distinct dimensions of health. This cautions against generalizations based on specific dimensions of health. Last but not least, the study provides an alternative perspective on the woman's bargaining power child welfare nexus. It shows that it's not always true that child welfare improves when a woman is more powerful compared to a scenario where there is balanced power within a household. Thank you, Mr. Rector Magnificus and colleagues, for your attention.
Thank you very much, dear candidate, for your clearly argued presentation. Let me again officially welcome in his own presence now your husband, Dr. Antoni. Most welcome. Dear candidate, we will now start the official examination of your thesis. I will do that in 2 rounds, meaning that I'll give every opponent 5 minutes time to debate with you, and then I return to them for a bit shorter second round. And so I'll call upon your first external examiner, Dr. Birkert from the University of East Anglia, to start the debate.
Okay. Thank